The desert gets quiet in winter, like a church after the hymn fades. Sound falls soft, the world holds its breath, and every footstep feels like you're walking inside a memory. I'd been riding fence lines since noon, watching a slow snow creep over the open like a tired sheet. The cattle were bedded, the sky was iron, and somewhere in that gray distance the sun was giving up without a fight. I ride alone most days. Not because I prefer it, just because a man learns to carry his own weather. My Mary's been gone 3 years now. The ring left a pale circle, the kind you keep seeing even after you shut your eyes. Folks say time scabs over loss. Maybe. But a scab still stings when you brush it. I crested a low ridge and saw the crossroads, 2 ruts making a crooked cross in the white. Off to the side, a fine carriage sat at a wrong angle. Wheel knocked awry, horse gone, driver gone. The kind of scene that makes a man slow up and look for tracks, look for trouble. Wind shuffled the snow like cards, laying down new hands over old ones. She stood there, velvet cloak, dark as storm water. A lady by all signs, gloves, a travel bag, that careful way of holding her chin that says a lifetime of rooms with walls and rules. Between gloved fingers she turned a brass compass, the needle jittering like a trapped bee. Her mouth moved once, the smallest whisper, and I caught just enough to know it wasn't meant for me. I'm lost. I swung down easy, let my gelding taste the air. The wheel hadn't broken. It had been cut clean, the kind of mean a knife understands. I touched the spoke, felt the slice, and something cold that wasn't winter crawled up my wrist. I've seen men do worse for less. Greed likes to borrow the weather's hands. "Ma'am," I said, voice low so it wouldn't spook the moment, "trail ain't fit for a soul to be standing come nightfall. Storm's coming in fast." She looked at me then, eyes the color of dry thunderheads, full of rain that wouldn't fall. "I don't know you," she said, and I heard all the teaching behind it. Ladies get raised on the sound of caution. "No, ma'am," I said on my, "but my children are waiting, and there's stew on. Everything else can wait for morning. I've learned to offer warmth before answers. A fire does the persuading better than any speech." Still I felt the old ache move under my ribs. Mary's apron hanging on its nail, a small pair of boots by the hearth, laughter I can't scrape from the walls. A house keeps every echo. She hesitated. Pride arguing with frostbite, the desert knows both voices. I kept my hands where they could be seen, the way you do around skittish horses and hurt people. At last she nodded barely. "Just until dawn." "Dawn's a long way off," I said, and offered the reins. "Let's get you warm." When her fingers touched the leather, I felt the tremble that runs out of a person's center when they've stood too long in the open. I took point, walking, leading a horse and stranger, compass in silence. Snow thickened, and the carriage fell behind us like a bad chapter turning its own page. On the trail, I listened to the small sounds, the click of metal, the hush of fabric, her breath working to keep pace. She didn't speak, and I didn't pry. The country between two strangers is best crossed at the speed of trust. Now and then the wind shouldered us, and I thought of how easy the world makes it to be alone, how hard it makes the choosing otherwise. Light showed before the house did. Smoke, yellow as old paper, wove up through winter like a promise written slow. 3 rooms of timber and honest habit came into view, the kind of place a banker would call poor and a tired soul might call enough. I pushed the door, warmth rose sweet as mercy. Tommy Lil, I called my company. My boy, 9 and trying hard to be older than that, straightened from his whittling, eyes measuring the situation like a man under oath. My little girl came running, stopped short when she saw velvet and sorrow under it. Children read the weather in a room quicker than any barometer. I gave a nod. Lil curtsied. Tommy pulled out a chair like he'd been born to it. We ate venison stew from wooden bowls. I set the largest portion in front of the lady, and my two made a show of not noticing. It's a good lesson, given without counting. Steam touched her face, and for a breath she looked stunned, like warmth had a taste she'd forgotten. "Thank you," she said barely. The words tried to be small, but gratitude has a way of filling the space it's given. I set coffee by her hand and saw her bag tilt, papers sliding like frightened birds, lawyer letters, a land deed, formal scrawl that smelled of courtrooms and cousins. I can't read more than cattle brands proper, but I know the look of trouble when it spreads its coat on my table. Out here we measure folks by what they do when tested, not by the weight of their purse or the polish on their boots. That's what I told myself, standing in that doorway between storm and fire, watching a woman who'd been cut loose, same as that wheel, same as I'd been once when God took Mary and left me with winter in my chest. I didn't know her name yet. Didn't know she'd thread herself through the rooms of this house the way music threads through a quiet Sunday. I only knew the desert had brought a stranger to my door. And sometimes the desert knows what a man needs better than he does. The wind pressed its face to the windows and went on. Inside, the room held. I breathed in wood smoke and new chances, and the scar under my shirt eased. Just a little. The way old scars do when they find other ones to sit beside. I woke before first light, the way I always do. The world was still holding its breath, the fire nothing but red bones in the stove. Snow pressed against the windows like ghosts too tired to knock. I stepped outside, axe in hand, the kind of rhythm work that don't need thinking. Just swing, breathe, repeat. Wood splits cleaner in the cold. So does truth sometimes. When I came back in, she was awake. Caroline, that's what she told me to call her. Her fine city clothes hung to dry by the hearth, and she was wrapped in one of Mary's old shawls. Looked out of place and right at home all at once. My children watched her like she was some creature from a book. I poured her coffee, sweet, strong, black, honest, and she smiled the kind of smile that says, "Thank you without words." We didn't talk much that morning. A silence can say plenty if you let it breathe. After breakfast, she offered to help with chores. I handed her that axe, half expecting she'd laugh, but she didn't. Hands soft as dove feathers wrapped around the handle. The first swing near knocked her off her feet. She cursed under her breath, quiet, polite but with spirit, and tried again and again. By noon she'd split 5 logs, palms raw and bleeding. "You don't quit easy," I said. "I've quit too many things already," she answered. The wind carried our breath away. There was something proud about the way she stood there, hair coming loose, cheeks red with effort. I'd seen rich folks treat work like punishment. Caroline treated it like confession. Later, while the children did their lessons, she told me her story. Husband dead, 6 months. Brother-in-law circling like a buzzard over what he thought was his. Claimed she wasn't fit to manage her own land. Claimed he'd see her locked away before Christmas. The kind of claim that makes a woman run until her carriage breaks and her compass spins mad. I didn't say much, just listened, jaw tight. Some wrongs don't need words. They need witnesses. Out here we don't measure a person by what they lose. We measure by what they build from the ruins. 3 days the storm pinned us down. Snow drifted high as fences. We made do, shared bread, stories, quiet. Nights were long, the kind that test a man's thoughts. Sometimes I'd find her by the fire, staring at Mary's apron hanging by the door. She touched the fabric once, soft as prayer. My mama used to sew, she said every stitch was a promise. Mary said that too, I told her. Guess good women think alike. That night, Lillian woke crying, fever bright in her cheeks. I'd seen sickness take too many out here. Caroline didn't hesitate. She sat by that little girl all night, wiping her brow with melted snow, humming songs that sounded half English, half memory. I found her there come dawn, head bowed, whispering, "Please not this one." When the fever broke, the girl opened her eyes and smiled weak. "You stayed," she said. "Of course I did," Caroline whispered back. I watched from the doorway, something tight in my chest giving way. Grief don't vanish. It just learns new shapes. That evening, when the house was quiet, she sat across from me by the fire. We didn't look at each other, but the air was full of words we hadn't found yet. "I'm afraid," she said finally. "Afraid that if I let myself love this, you, them, this life, I'll lose it." I took a slow breath. "Fear's just love turned backward, Caroline. It's what happens when you care too much to say it out loud." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Sometimes the silence between two people feels like a bridge instead of a wall. Outside, the storm still raged. Inside, something steadier took root, quiet as seeds under frost, patient as hope waiting on spring. I didn't know what the next day would bring. I only knew the desert had stopped feeling empty. By the third day, the snow eased off. The world looked scrubbed clean. Sky sharp, ground shining, air so still you could hear the creek talking to itself. But storms never end all at once. They just change shape sometimes. They wear a man's name. We were splitting kindling when I heard the hoofbeats, one rider coming fast. I felt it before I saw him, that certain tension the land gets when trouble's on approach. I set down the axe, wiped my palms, and told Tommy to take his sister inside. The man who rode up had the look of a hired gun, clean coat, cold eyes, too sure of himself. "Mrs. Brennan," he called out, "your brother-in-law sent me time to come home." Caroline froze. The color left her face like a candle snuffed. "She's under my roof," I said, stepping between them. "That makes her my concern." "This ain't your fight, McCoy." "It is now." We stared each other down. Two men cut from different cloth, one with money's permission, the other with nothing left to lose but his word. He looked past me at the house, at the children's faces in the window, and something in him faltered. He pulled the reins. "Town'll hear about this," he warned, and turned his horse. I didn't lower my rifle till the dust settled. Inside, Caroline's hands were shaking. "I should leave," she said. "I'm putting you in danger." "Danger's always here, much," I told her. "Question is whether we face it together or die separate now." Tommy stood in the doorway, small but certain. "We vote together," he said. Lillian ran off, came back with a blue apron, Mary's old one, the same she'd been staring at for days. Mama would want you to have this, she told her. Caroline took it like it was made of glass. I saw her eyes soften, saw gratitude wash through her like dawn over snow. For a long while after that, peace held, the fragile kind you whisper thanks for. We went to town together when the road thawed. Folks stared, whispered, "Now that's her and the rich widow staying with McCoy. Ain't proper. Man can't even read." The shopkeeper, old acquaintance, refused her service. "Can't sell to folks of questionable character," he said. I laid my coins on the counter. "Then sell to me," I said, "and I'll share with who I please." Outside, I split the goods between us in plain sight. "What's mine is hers," I said loud enough for the wind to carry. That stirred the town more than a sermon. A woman stepped from the crowd. Ada Harper, the school teacher who lost her voice to fever years ago. She wrote on her slate, "Judge hearts, not stations. I'll testify for you." Caroline's throat worked, but no sound came. Ada smiled, wrote again, "You're teaching his children to read. He's teaching you to live. That's marriage without vows." We rode home quiet, snow crunching under hooves, moonlight silvering the trail. That night, by the fire, Caroline helped me read a contract I'd near been cheated by. She pointed slow, patient. "See here, they're taking first pick as your calves with no payment guarantee." I looked at her, this woman who'd walked out of wealth into wilderness, and felt something steady build in my chest. "I'll teach you the land," I said. "You teach me the words." She smiled. "Deal." We shook on it like partners. After she went to bed, I sat alone a while, watching the coals dim. My hands smelled of pine and ink, my heart of something I hadn't felt since Mary died. Not forgetting. Just room enough for new light to come in. The next morning, we heard the word from Clearwater. Warren Kent had filed claim to declare Caroline unsound of mind. Wanted her property, her dignity, her name. Folks said there'd be a hearing come Christmas Eve. She folded the notice, eyes unreadable. "Looks like my past found its way through the storm." I nodded slow. "Then we'll meet it head on." Sometimes the trail you think you left behind circles back, not to punish, but to see what kind of person you've become. I reckoned we were about to find out. The morning of Christmas Eve broke cold and clear, the kind of cold that bites clean through pride. I saddled my horse before dawn, but Caroline was already dressed, plain wool dress, hair tied back, the blue apron folded neat around her waist like a flag she meant to carry into battle. We rode into Clearwater together, the children bundled with Ada Harper riding close behind in her wagon. Half the town had turned out for the hearing. Folks don't need much reason to gather when justice or gossip's in the air. Inside that drafty courthouse, Warren Kent sat smiling like sin in a silk collar. Sheriff looked nervous, judge looked tired, and the rest looked hungry for entertainment. Caroline kept her chin high. I stayed close enough she could feel my breath when she trembled. Warren stood first, smooth as snake oil. "My late brother's widow has proven unfit," he said. "She's abandoned her home, given away valuables, taken up with an uneducated man of low standing. I fear for her sanity." He gestured my way like I was a stain on his carpet. "Mr. McCoy cannot even sign his name. What wisdom could he offer anyone?" Laughter rippled through the room, cruel and small. Caroline rose slow, every inch of her steady. I gave an apron to a child because it belonged to her mother. I gave my jewelry to a school because children need books more than I need ornaments. And I said I was lost, because I was, until a good man showed me what home feels like. That quiet hit harder than any shout. I stood then, couldn't sit no more. Judge her, judge me, I said. My voice came rough but clear. I can't read fancy law, but I know decency when I see it. This woman sat up nights, nursing my little girl through fever. She taught my boy to be kind when the world ain't. She split wood till her hands bled. If that's unsound, then every good soul in this territory ought to be locked up. The judge blinked like a man waking from a spell, but Warren just smiled, cold and certain. Very touching, he said, but the law requires witnesses of stability, and you, Mr. McCoy, are hardly impartial. He turned to the sheriff. Take her into custody for her own safety. Caroline touched my arm before I could move. Her eyes said, don't. I'll go, she whispered. If I stay, you'll lose more than land. And just like that, she walked between them, straight-backed, proud, and never looked away. At the door, something fell from her pocket. Her compass, the one that never could find north. I picked it up, watched her disappear into snow and silence. For 3 days, I sat at that kitchen table, the compass turning lazy in my palm. Couldn't work, couldn't sleep. The house felt wrong without her voice soft in it, without the way she hummed when stirring the pot or read by the firelight. The children tried to keep quiet for my sake, but quiet has edges too. Then, just as the thaw began, Ada Harper came riding hard through the slush. She slid off her horse, holding a letter in her mittened hand. From Caroline, she wrote on her slate. I broke the seal. The words looked careful, the ink smudged by what I guessed were tears. Warren's locked me inside the study with all my books. I've never felt more alone. But you taught me wealth ain't silver or title. It's who you shelter with your heart. If you can forgive a foolish woman who learned too late, come for me. Not to save me, to stand with me. I'm not lost anymore. I'm waiting. Caroline, my chair scraped back hard. We rise, I said. Tommy looked up from the hearth. Just us, Papa. No, I said, reaching for my coat. Not this time. Ada nodded, wrote one word, together. By dawn, 7 riders stood ready. Ada, the Doyles, even Travis Dunn, the drunk who lied for Warren and couldn't live with it. Snow still clung to the sagebrush, but the sky promised clear. Before we mounted, Tommy pointed at the snow. Was that your writing, Papa? I looked down. The stick in my hand had traced a name. Caroline. My first written word. I smiled faintly. Your mama'd be proud. Then I swung into the saddle and felt something old come alive. Not anger, not vengeance, just purpose. The trail home to her was long and mean, but so's love sometimes. You ride it anyway. Caroline's estate rose against the dawn like a ghost that refused to die. White fences, trimmed gardens, windows glowing with lies. Warren had gathered half the county to watch him win. I could smell the arrogance before I saw his face. 7 of us rode in, dust and resolve trailing behind. Warren stepped down from the porch, papers in hand, his voice smooth as oil. You're trespassing, McCoy. She's where she belongs, under proper supervision. I swung down slow, boots crunching frost. She belongs where her heart is. He laughed, holding up his papers like armor. Legal commitment, signed by a doctor. Can't argue with the law. The sheriff shifted uneasy beside him. Gotta respect the seal, Grant, even when it smells foul. Even when it's a lie, I asked. Then from the upper window, movement. The curtain parted. Caroline stood there, hair unbound, eyes bright as firelight. For a heartbeat, the whole crowd stilled. She smiled, not the careful kind a lady wears, but the wild one she'd found in the snow. Then she pushed the window open. Before anyone could stop her, she climbed out. Gasps broke through the cold air. A lady don't do that. A sane woman don't do that, but she wasn't either anymore. She was free. She dropped to the porch roof, then to the ground. Boots thudding soft on earth, walked through Warren's hired men like they were ghosts. When she reached me, I swear the world tilted right again. I'm signing the estate over, she said loud enough for heaven to hear, to the town, for a school and an orphanage. Warren's face went pale. You can't. I already did. She pulled folded papers from her bodice. Witnessed. Sealed. True. Last night. He spun to the crowd. She's insane. Throwing away a fortune. Caroline met his rage with calm. No, I'm keeping what matters. Then she took my hand. Fingers steady, calloused from work she'd earned herself. I'm keeping this. Ada raised her slate above her head. Love wins. Silence cracked. Then applause. Real, rough, human. The sheriff looked at Warren's forged papers, then hers, and spat. Can't enforce a lie, Warren. You best leave. Warren's mouth twisted, but he saw it was done. Money can buy silence, not respect. He climbed into his carriage and rode off into the kind of cold no fire could thaw. The crowd pressed close, questions flying, but we slipped through them, heading for the horses. Caroline looked at me, tears bright as morning dew. You came? You asked me to. She smiled, small, honest. I love you. I stopped, turned her toward me. I loved Mary once, I said, voice low. She'll always be part of me, but there's room for you too, if you'll have a man still learning to write your name. Her breath caught. Then she kissed me right there, in front of God, the law, and everyone who ever doubted. When we broke apart, Tommy and Lillian were crying, happy tears this time. Snow began to fall again, soft, forgiving. We rode home together, me, her, the kids, in a town that finally learned what decency looks like. Spring came gentle that year. We married under the cottonwoods behind the house, Ada signing our vows with her hands. I read mine from paper. Tommy helped me write. Slow, careful words. I promised to build with you, work beside you, stay when storms come. Caroline's voice didn't shake. I promised to love your children as my own, to honor the woman who came before me, and to choose you every day. No rings, just calloused hands holding tight. The whole town came. They brought food, forgiveness, and laughter that hung in the rafters like sunlight. Up on the hill, the new schoolhouse stood bright. Children's voices carried through the wind. Later, when the day was done, Caroline and I walked to the garden. She planted wildflowers in the raw earth, colors breaking through brown soil. I helped her dig, our hands working in rhythm, the same rhythm that saved us. Inside, Tommy read from a book. Lillian drew pictures of a house with smoke rising, hearts all over the roof. The compass sat on the mantel now, quiet and still. It didn't need to spin anymore. Neither did I. I pulled Caroline close as the sun melted into the west. You know, I said home ain't a place, Caroline. It's who walks beside you when the trail gets rough. She leaned into me, soft smile against my chest. Then I'm home. And I reckon she was. We both were. The prairie wind moved through the grass like a hymn. The house glowed warm behind us. Some folks spend their whole lives searching for treasure. The wise ones learn it's who waits for you when the searching's done. And maybe love ain't about holding on. It's about learning to let go gentle.